Good morning.
Morning.
Great to have you all here. We are in the midst of confusion, which is the normal state of the church, so it's good to see you all in a normal room. I think we have everything back together now. We have a different boombox, but that boombox works, and that's important because we have certain part of our session together that always comes from the boombox. There's an important message in it every time you hear it. We don't own election. It's out there. It is in the air. We simply point to it and thank God for it. And it takes all kinds of forms. You'll hear another one this morning. This is a traveling mic, wireless mic. We'll use this for questions and comments from the floor now. Don't let me forget this, okay? Because this will make it easier for you to be picked up on the video. There's a video of every session. If you miss a session and want to see it, though you've missed it, you can do it from the website. And so you do that way. Or if you think a class was really great when you were here, you can also see it again. One of the great things Second does for you. So remember that. Remember that we have that facility here at Second Church, which is really a good thing. Now, if you weren't at church, that's too bad, because as usual, the worship service has something for us. Were I doing this course again, I would require that all of you, before coming here, once I knew we were at 11, before coming here, I would require you to get a running start by going to a worship service and then come here. There's always something in it, especially for us, and this time there really was. 4 children, 3 of them real infants, were baptized all in a row this morning. How many of you were in worship? A lot of you. Good, good. Oh, great. Look at this. We have some extra bulletins. Some of you may not realize, I imagine some of you do, that infant baptism has been controversial throughout the history of the church in somewhat the same way that election has, and for some of the same reasons. You remember the one, those of you who are there's 4 of them. But one of them was the sister, I think, of a brother who was maybe 4 or 5, who was wearing a red sweater. And when she was baptized, he came right up to the baptismal font. It was a little bit higher than he was.
Yeah, peeked in.
And he tried to peek in. Wasn't that you? Wasn't that me? Infant baptism is election in a sacrament. It's God coming to you and picking you out before you had a thing to say about it. It's a message so powerful that we all, if you've been trained to love it, there are some Christians who have been trained to be suspicious of it because, of course, it has a problem. How could a little infant be ushered into the church as a Christian without making any decision at all themselves? There's something wrong with that. And indeed there is. If you don't teach around it and teach what it actually needs, nonetheless, there's nothing more powerful in the church, direct message-wise, about election than that sacrament. Nothing. Do you get it? It's there for us. Thank God. Let us pray. Help us, Lord. Help us take our lives and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Help us be your people now, in this day, in this hour. Thank you for all the gifts you've given us. Help us use them as you would have it. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
moving as well?
Oh, absolutely. Moving in a different way. I think the really great kind are teen baptism, in between infant and adult. All baptisms are great, just terrific, but different ways. And you know, elections in all of them. But I think in infant baptism, it's really clear. It's really, you know, you have trouble with it, just go to infant baptism. Soak it in. But quite right. You bet. Adult baptism is very, very poignant. You kneel down, absolutely, absolutely. All right. It's a quick background. How many of you who signed up to get that chapter got it? The chapter from my book? Good, good, good. All right. Send it, when did I send it? I think Friday night? Late in the week. Just awful timing. But some of you got it, right? You're all in a file, and I sent it to all of you once, and your email is hidden, BCC. So you should get it. Those of you, have any of you had a chance to look at it? Chapter. All right. Is it okay? All right. Questions? Okay. We may wait to send another one until after next week. You don't have to read these things. This is the class. All you need is to come to class. But as background to some of these classes, I've got written drafts. So I'm using that, and you let me know if it helps or not. I mean, it may help you understand me, because by this class, you know, I've kind of got you where I want you. First of all, you know a little bit about me. Matt gave me a book reference that I'm now going to reference. Me, a deviant Calvinist. That's really what you've got here. You've got somebody that's rooted in Calvinism but deviates a bit. You also know the whole business about the church and how important the church is to understanding election. You've got that, and we kind of are ourselves become the church, as we will in a moment with Bonnie's help. You also got the Bible bit, that the Bible, if the church is the school for election, the Bible is the textbook, and that's it's on tap today. In the back is the Predestination course as a whole. That packet is back there. Also, the handout for today, a running start, is back there. I hope you all have it. So you have those things, and you're probably beginning to get why election is important, not just as a doctrine and teaching, but for you. Once you start to get election, you realize that it really is for everybody in the room. And with it comes something you really want to talk about. Election is a mystery on the one hand. We never figure it all out. As Bart says, the questions never cease. But we need to talk about it, because the election is the election of you, and it's also of you for something. For what? If you're elect, I think you are. You're elect for something. What would that be? Once you're there, then we're ready. Then we're ready to start the class. Okay? Now we're ready to start talking. Are you ready to start talking? I am. So, in the beginning of the chapter that I sent around, I tell you about Geneva. There's a Museum of the Reformation in Geneva. It's terrific. International Museum of the Reformation in Geneva, which has in it a predestination dining room. It's fabulous. It gets the most traffic. And so you wind your way around this Reformation museum, and it has all these great pictures, but you go in this dining room, and there's nobody there. But there are empty seats all around the dining room table. It's as if set up for a dinner. And at each of the places is a name tag of one of the grand figures of the 16th century. Some German, some French, some Swiss, Polish, and so on. The grand figures of that time. There are many Reformations. One of the things you'll find out if you start studying the Reformation, there's more than one of them. A number of them. Presbyterianism comes primarily from the Swiss version of the Reformation. Well, anyway, what the predestination banquet is in this dining room is a conversation about election. Some of the people believe it one way, some of the people believe it another, some don't believe it, but they know why they don't believe it, and they come in there and talk about it. That's the point. It's a terrific doctrine to talk about. Absolutely terrific. Where it hits the road, where it gets traction is, you're elect for what? Let's talk about that. All right? Let's talk about that. We're going to have openings. Every class is going to be for that, and maybe you'll dominate. I hope you dominate. Let's talk about it. The idea about elections, it's a doctrine that's alive, and we can sense that, I think, as the class goes forward. We're going to use the Bible as a jumping off point now all the rest of the time. We've got 3 more sessions, counting today, before we have a break. November 30th, no class, and then 2 at the end. They'll all be the same. Be a Bible thing, and then we'll talk about this. Now let's sing. One of the great hymns of the Bonnie's Long is going to be our pianist. Thank you, Bonnie, for volunteering.
Well, my husband volunteered.
Thank you, Bonnie, for letting your husband volunteer you. It's an old story. 391. You're really showing up. We'll do, I'm going to ask Bonnie to give us full support for, maybe you can play it through once, Bonnie, and then we'll do verse 1 and 2 now. We'll come around at the end of the class. We'll do 5 and 6. Frances Ridley Havergal wrote this in the 19th century, and she did it all at once. It came during a 15-day retreat. And the line that really rings through the whole hymn is right at the end. We're going to get there. It's this grand hymn of the church, Take My Life. So I'm asked Bonnie to play it through once, then we'll come in, and Bonnie to give us everything on the first verse, but then back off a little bit on the second, and then stop. All right? Well, hear it once.
Swift and beautiful for thee.
for being volunteered to be our pianist. That's terrific. That's terrific. Absolutely. The election and call are, of course, linked. I've already linked them in talking to you. One of the grandest services of ordination I've ever seen was opened by the candidate, by a great voice, in the back of the church, singing the first verse of this song. It's fabulous, just fabulous. If ever you're on an ordination planning committee and you can raise your hand, $3.91 in the hymnal. All right. Let us tell a story. What I want to do here, do I have a, yes I do. I'm always discombobulated in classes, but this time I'm particularly so because we were rounding up things. I want to tell you a Beecher story on the way to Cain and Abel. And that's what we'll do. I'm going to say again that we have a couple of really grand books that surround this course, and one of them, not the only one, but one of them is by Peter Tucson, who lives down around IUPUI. He's an Anglican warden, Episcopal rather, warden, man of faith. And he tells the story of predestination very well. Now, in the middle of this book, and I've already heard from some of you, this is a hard book. Okay, but you can get by the history stuff in the beginning, but just jump in the middle. There are just some fabulous case studies in here, and one of them is about the Beechers. This picture is probably somewhere in this church, because Henry Ward is in it. Lyman Beecher is the Dr. Father, more or less. He was a New England minister of real note, and he had all these children. 7 of them, I believe, became clergymen. Awful things in the same family. 7 clergymen. But there also were women in that family. Some of them led very interesting, distinctly, you can imagine, growing up in that setting, how they would be prepared for combat and life. And one of them is very, very prominent, who's, who the story's about. The other one, Catherine, a little bit older, in the Beecher family, she took off, and all of them really went against predestination and Calvinism in some way or other. And Catherine decided, particularly I think when her mate died, that Calvinism just does not work, principally because she was not sure about whether her mate had confessed Christianity strongly enough in order to wind up in heaven. That is such the wrong concern for election. You know we're on a wrong track. You know we're on a wrong track, friends and neighbors, if that's the concern about the doctrine of election. There's Catherine, but then there's Harriet. I want to tell you a story about Harriet Beecher Stowe. Maybe the greatest single artist of the 19th century. She was just fabulous. It's not only Uncle Tom's Cabin. She wrote a lot of other things, and she said a lot of things. And she did this extraordinary thing. Tucson gets underneath it and tells the story of it. And here's the story. The family went all kinds of different ways based on their reaction to their father. Strict Calvinist, predestinarian to the core, in the traditional sense. From Catherine's unapologetic embrace of Pelagian free will, that's the opposition to predestination, to Charles and Edward's Mormon-like resort to preexistence. I mean, two of these guys went Mormon. It's amazing. The Beechers represented the radical conclusions that dissatisfaction with predestinarianism would elicit. Yet at least one Beecher, the celebrated novelist Harriet Beecher Stowe, 1811 to 1896, followed a more sacramental religious path. She ended up Episcopalian, and I know Peter likes that. That would lead her away from questions of human volition that so preoccupied her siblings. Well, I want you to do the same thing. As you know, how do you get free will and predestination together? I answer that with very short, quick, bullet-like answers. I don't want to stay there. It's the wrong pit. Don't go down that rabbit hole. I think that's right. It's not right against predestination, but it's right not to be preoccupied with that about predestination. Okay? Like her sister Catherine, Harriet became obsessed with questions of election and damnation after losing a loved one who had not yet experienced the requisite Calvinist conversion. In this case, her son Henry, a student at Dartmouth who drowned in 1857, I think he was 17 or something, while swimming the Connecticut River. Grief-stricken and haunted by the uncertainty of Henry's eternal destiny, Stowe penned The Minister's Wooing in 1859, short novel, which, along with the Old Town Folks in 1869, a decade later, concluded that Augustinianism failed to take into account the experience of women as mothers of the human race. Women's nature has never been consulted in theology, she wrote. But if it had, the Augustinian view of woman as mere temptress would have yielded to a different kind of theology. Now, when you read Westminster, as some of you probably already have and some of you may in the future, think of that. 153 men, 1,620 meetings, all men. Unlike, back to Tucson now, unlike male system builders, quote, women are always turning from the abstract to the individual and feeling where the philosopher only thinks. End quote. A theology informed by a mother's grief would have long ago downplayed the tortured intricacies of election and reprobation and would have focused instead on the love of Christ. Think so? You bet it would. And we live in a privileged era. And the women's movement, in about 3 different waves between then and now, have provided extraordinary instruction to the Christian community and the Christian church that the Beecher family, in the midst of the 19th century, did not have. We've got it. Now look, God is not women's voice writ large. It certainly isn't men's voice writ large either. And I think the good things that have happened to election and predestination recently are really good. The enemy that you see me aiming at, and you'll probably see a lot of the people that I recommend to you aiming at. Let me give it a name. It's impossibly academic phrase I'm going to give you, but of course I am one. I'm really weird. I'm one of these footnote guys. When I read books, I think the footnotes are the most important part. Hardly anybody thinks that. I may be the only person in the room that thinks that. That's the kind of person I am. Now, the enemy that we're against here, that I'm against all across the board, is dyadic thinking. I also can't write. Dyadic, D-Y-A-D-I-C, dyadic thinking. You see it everywhere in the arguments. Westminster has its own version of it. It's hard to know, once you start thinking this way, it's hard to stop. The key counter to dyadic thinking is difference does not mean necessarily contradiction. It can, but it doesn't have to. It seems so simple. It isn't simple. Because what you have here is a whole string of dyads that we think in terms of, and we've got to stop doing it. One is, of course, Jew and Christian. Even though Paul does his marvelous thing, he is a Jew. This marvelous thing towards in Romans, we still do it. Go against him. Great missionary for the mission of Christian faith. Go against him. Jew and Christian, Old Testament, New Testament, law, grace, reprobate, elect or saved, just God, who of course tells the reprobate where they should go, loving God, who forgives the saved and calls them into heaven. It doesn't stop. Dyadic thinking has helped to lead us down a very bad path. Most of the church is still on it. When you look at election carefully, it gets you into the missionary frame of mind. We've got to get out of here. Part of it, of course, is the most common Christian attitude toward Jews, which is supersessionist. Have any of you heard that name, that word? How many of you heard this? Supersessionist. It's even hard to spell. But you know what it is. Supersessionist means that the Christianity, when it came along, became a royal priesthood and a holy nation. You know who was the holy nation and the royal priesthood? Israel. That's right. And so we're the holy nation and the royal priesthood. Now we have superseded Israel. Is there any more need for Israel now? Theologically? There is not. That's how dangerous supersessionist is. Because you start there, and there's trouble ahead. There's been trouble all through history, ever since the Second Temple period, but there have been periods of awful, awful trouble. Coming to a head maybe in the middle of the 20th century, but there's a lot of coming to heads.
So superstition.
David.
What you're saying is that in supersessionist thought, we've replaced the Jewish.
That's correct. There's no more need for them.
Okay.
Okay, we've got it all now.
But that means that they're both separate. We're not sure if it should not, it'd still be the same thing, but maybe on a continuum of time frame and idea of what the whole plan
Yes.
of God was.
Right, I mean, I think to make it simpler, both simpler than my words about it, and that fairly clear explanation, an even simpler one is Acts 15. I mean, look at the Bible. You don't have to go out to the 21st century to figure this out. Lewis has preached about it. I have a quibble with his sermon. His sermon was great. It was terrific. My quibble is that he just wants to go with the right procedures in Acts 15. This is that great Jerusalem meeting, Peter and Paul. He wants to go with the values. And he doesn't like, he kind of moves apart, is it following Johnson? He moves apart from the actual deal that was made, the kind of arrangement that was made then between the Jewish Christian party and Paul. I think the arrangement was pretty good. And so, we got to catch up with that. We're not even there yet. Lewis is quite right to preach on it as if we weren't, and I'll go even further. I think Acts 15 is the answer. But of course, we've got to get questions right and so on. Any more you want to say before we zoom into Cain and Abel? Cain and Abel is a terrific beginning for us. But let's get your questions now on this kind of my rambling here on election, and use the mic. Linda, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is, I'm just curious, what do you say is the difference between dyadic thinking and dualistic thinking?
They're close. Dyadic, I use dyadic. You know why I use dyadic? Linda, you smoke me out. Another book with a lot of footnotes in it. If you read carefully my footnotes in that chapter on Cain and Abel, I really do, another Reformation by Peter Rose, I really do commend this book. He talks about dyadic thinking all the time in here, and I think he's right. He's a Jewish philosopher that I think every Christian, every seminary student should read. It's just fantastic. Another Reformation, post-liberal Christianity in the Jews. It's just remarkable. He's a Jew who then writes a novel of appreciation of Christians, and his grasp of this field of Christian theology is so extraordinary that the people who were in it say, my God, I never knew this. He's a Jew. Great stuff. Decades ahead of his time, of course. That's why I use that. It's kind of like dualistic thinking. If that's easier for you, fine. Yeah. That thinks in these terms, and they think about them in terms of contradiction rather than simply difference, perhaps enriching difference, and I think that's the point in Acts 15. I think they concluded, they could have exploded right then. They concluded, we've got something here, and we don't want to see it split up. Other questions? Yes, over here. It's Glenn. All right, Glenn. Yes. Good.
Make it quick. Maybe you could comment on this. When I was on the West Coast visiting my mom, one of her caregivers was a great Christian woman. Started giving me all of this about how terrible the Jews are. And off it went. And then I asked my brother about it, and he said, yes, it's really prevalent out there. He doesn't know where he does kind of, but he said a lot of it out there. And I was shocked. I was hoping us as Christians had come just a little further, but where I can speak for myself, we're easily duped.
Sure.
So I wonder if you could comment.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're talking about?
I would be glad to comment. Thank you, Glenn. That's a terrific question. Just hold on to that mic. This is very difficult to parse right now, Glenn's comment. And you know why? You know what took place in this classroom? This very room, an hour before? Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Where it's certainly arguable that Jews and Israelis have done some pretty questionable things. What is your relative talking about? What's being talked about there when you go out to California? You know, is it politics or is it Jews as Jews? Glenn?
That caregiver's no longer there. She's gone up to Oregon.
Oh, okay.
But I was there for some time, and it really disturbed my mom, who's 92, but
I see.
she didn't say much, but she was always on the internet. And I think so my brother said in his scholastic year, he said, always try to ask a question, where do you get your information? And I thought about that, and that's where I came. She's always on the internet.
Yes.
And of course, the joke is, of course, it's in writing, it must be true. But yet we tend to believe all this, but we're so fallen, or easily duped is all I can think of.
Oh, we're fallen. Yeah, I'll take that.
That's
But we
speaking for
are
myself.
easily duped. Indeed, indeed. Anti-Semitism is real.
It was shocking.
It's real. And I think to some extent, in some places more than others, Christianity has something to do with it. And so we have to try to push back. You know, one of the ways I put it for this class is election, if you like it, it's not our doctrine. It's a Jewish doctrine. It's a grand idea. That's where it starts. It comes from them. And the elect one, the rejected one, the electing one, he's a Jew too. And the first missionary kind of talked about the doctrine for the first time as a doctrine, the new kind of Christian version of it. He was a Jew too. Pope Francis is correct. Inside every Christian is a Jew. Period. How many Christians realize that? It's not true that the Old Testament is the opposite of the New. The fact is the New Testament is unintelligible without the Old Testament. You can't get anywhere. Now we have to be a little bit more open about that. We have a little bit more candid about how Jewish a book the New Testament is. And we are. So that's a little rant from Wayne. Other questions or comments now? Yep, right over here. And your name again?
Carol.
Oh, Carolyn. All right.
So after each class, I have wondered, and then you brought up the baptism part of it today, what about children, people who can't elect, who are profoundly impaired?
Yeah.
That's who I take care of.
Yeah.
And parents ask, we talk about that.
That's where you cling to election and never let election go. It's not up to them.
Not up to.
The children. It's not up to the impaired ones. What does what you know about God tell you about the relation between those impaired infants or children and salvation and God and so on? What does it tell you?
Well, they're children of God.
Yeah. One would think.
Right.
And their impairment, what's the effect of the impairment on that, on God's nearness to them, on God's love for them, on God's hold on them? Zero. That's the force of election, is saying the great choice is not theirs. The great choice has been made. Has been made. Don't worry about that. Love them now, because you're just following God in that love.
But yeah, no, I don't worry about it when parents are worried about it.
Help them.
Right.
Bring them in here.
I
I know. It's a joke. It's a joke.
I mean, they have great faith.
Yeah, good.
I mean, they've had to because of what they're feeling.
Absolutely.
Biblically, we're told that those that are lesser
Yes.
are to be cared for because they are children of God, whether they be in the Old Testament, we talked about Jews and widows,
Right.
And in the New Testament, they talk about weak and
Absolutely.
poor
Absolutely.
in that shape, so.
Yeah, so we pray for you in that spot to kind of help shore them up and help them see the love of God has never left. Ever. Other questions or comments before we move on to KKW? Yes, Charlie. Charles.
The children, the babies.
Yes.
I think it's chapter 10 of the Westminster Confession talks about the damnation of unbaptized infants.
Elect infants, that's correct.
That is disturbing.
It's disturbing. I'll tell you the only hopeful thing about it. If I can try to find something hopeful in that paragraph. Chapter 10 of the Westminster Confession talks about children, talks about infant baptism, and talks about, well, the dividing line between the saved and the reprobate when it comes to children. The redeeming feature of that little phrase is that Presbyterians have furiously argued about it for centuries. And for some parts of the Presbyterian Reformed community, that now is excised from the Westminster Confession. They're still oriented to the Confession, but that's out of there. And in a way, that brings me back to the good thing about confessions and about the doctrine of election. It's discussable. Let's talk about it. It has to do with you, me, and thee. So let's talk about it. Let's see what it does mean and what it doesn't mean and what we can sit with as God's children. It's a good point. It's in there. In some versions of the confession, which is really great. You see it in the footnotes, what did I tell you? You see it in the footnotes, and you can see the history of this confession as it's developed over time, and how the church has been able to sit with it and hasn't been able to sit with some of it. These are your brothers and sisters of faith. These are the democracy of the dead. These are your brothers and sisters who struggle with this and come to their own decisions. See what they've done. And don't be like me, only focus so much on what hasn't been done. There's some good stuff that has been done that helps us. Other questions now or comments before we go on to... Yes.
Becky. Let's see if I can.
And your name?
Becky.
Becky.
It is when you put it
Oh, it's on. It's on. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
All right. I wasn't here last week. I was here the first week. Election is God loving everyone. Our response to that election determines our afterlife. So we have a responsibility towards that being elected. The election comes from Him. The response to that comes from us. Is that safe to say?
Well, it's very nicely put, and it raises the question of the relationship between election and human
Free will.
responsibility. Absolutely, free will and works and all that. What I usually do with that is say, you're onto something. I'm not sure I agree with every word that you said, but you're onto something, and I would then point you to some parts of the Bible that show the intersection between divine initiative and human responsibility in a way that I would stand with. And say finally that what we've got here is an intersection that is mysterious to its core. To
Judgment
its
somewhere.
core. What?
There's judgment somewhere.
One would think. Yep.
That can be supported in Scripture as well.
Yes, the judgment part. Wow. Yeah. How does judgment fit in? I mean, I think the Philippians verse that I keep coming back to here is you do work out your salvation with fear and trembling, don't you? And God works and wills in that fear and trembling to do his will. Now, it's a mysterious thing. It's a both and thing, and for election people, we want to come out with the praise of God, for in the end, God has done it all. If you can come out there, I'm with you. You know, this is where election always pushes you. Don't lose grace. Don't use the graciousness of grace. And talk about human free will can do it.
Are you heading towards everyone being saved?
Am I hoping for everyone being saved?
No, that's all I said.
I know
I
it isn't.
hope
I know it isn't what you said. It's what I said. Are you interested in whether I'm hoping for everyone to be saved?
No.
Okay.
I'm interested in whether you believe that.
Yeah. I don't know enough to believe that, frankly. And if you push me, I don't think you do either.
Nobody's going to have it all figured out.
But I think that what I would talk about here, you can probably sense it in my body language, is that I not only hope for it, I think every Christian in the world should hope for it. Without doubt. Without qualification.
That's why it's hard to think in terms of elect. When you have the hope that everyone, whether they're elected or not, has that opportunity.
Well,
Through God's grace.
yeah. The reason I don't go along with that entirely is because I think thinking about election is a good thing, because it describes what's happened to me. And were it not for that, I don't think I'd be here. Were it not for the overwhelming choosing of God, I wouldn't be here. And so, it's just a witness, really. And I hold it together with a hope that in the end, God will be all in all, and everyone will be lifted.
So you're thinking in terms of being elected isn't necessarily something you're born with, but something that can be
Darn
based on
right.
you
Paul
as
argued against it.
God.
Absolutely. This was part of his argument. He said, he's so furious at the Jews. Why can't you see in Jesus? He's what you hope for all of your days. Don't you see it here? Election does not come through blood, and it doesn't come through ethnos. It comes through the choice of God. You've got it in your own histories. Why don't you see it here? That's his great argument between Paul and his brothers and sisters. No, it doesn't come through blood. Not at all. It doesn't come through your family. You know, the right family, the right race, the right class.
They come through his putting his soul on you, or can come later in life.
Well, it comes at all times. You know, the Bible's full of late life elections, but what they say, when you say, you're like, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see this earlier? Why did I wait so long? Forgive me, God. Forgive me. Now I'm starting to get it. I see the mic is Linda. Linda, yes.
Lindsay.
Oh, Lindsay, sorry.
It seems to me that when we get to the point where we start asking, who is God for us, rather than what we believe or what we,
Okay.
that's a major turning point. Is that right?
Yes. It's for me. You hear what she said? When you get off the belief thing, I believe in the right thing, believe in the wrong thing, you get on to you shift to who is God? And who is God for me? Who is God for my family? Who is God for the world? Who, rather than what? Or what if I got my beliefs right. That's a big shift, huge shift. Look at this is something. Yes,
Shut me up anytime. What I've just heard leads me to questions I just can't ponder very well, but that's,
Sure.
my 3 words are, who is God then? Now, what does it say about God, I guess, but who is God
Yes,
as it relates to the creation,
yes,
choices,
yes,
and love,
yes.
God's love?
All right. Have you got my chapter?
No, but I'm really stuck there for
Well,
a long
listen.
time.
There's 2 kinds of election. One of the things that come up in the chapter is there's 2 kinds of election. And one of the big problems with the whole election discussions only focuses on one. There are 2. First one is the technical name for it isn't very, very technical. It's general election. And that has all the questions you've asked inside it. That is God's election, loving choice, of the universe, of the world, of the earth. There is no special election. We've been talking largely here about special election, human free will and all that. There is no special election. Read the Bible. Genesis 1 comes before Genesis 4, or 20, or whatever. It's written that way for a reason. General election should come first because special election is hard to get without it. And it has all of your questions in it, and because they're all there, and I try to elaborate them a little bit in the chapter, in the beginning. How I approach the Bible, you got to decide how I approach the Bible, and then what do you do with the run-up to Cain and Abel? Cain and Abel is not, what I said about the Old and New Testament, I'd say about here. You don't really get Cain and Abel too well unless you get 1, 2, and 3 pretty well. That's the problem. There's so much in 1, 2, and 3. It's hard to lay that out quickly, but I try to. And I do hit all those questions about free will, about relationship between God's creation and human beings, how they fit into it. And then, of course, the Genesis 3 business about the fall. David, this is to be the last question, then we got music, and then we'll sing our way out. And we'll go do Cain and Abel, focus on Cain and Abel next time. And I'll say, look, you all who are in the chapter, read at least the first part, because Glenn is in there. Those questions are very good ones, and that's where we'll start next time. David?
Paul writes in Romans, says it's not anything that I can do, whether I choose or otherwise, to be saved by this grace, but it's only by the sacrifice of Jesus and his overwhelming grace, and that was I can only get that by God's choice. God is who makes me right. I can't follow enough laws. I can't do blah, blah, blah. We all know that. What can we do as mere humans to earn such a place? Nothing. The only thing that makes us right is God himself makes us right.
That's right.
And that's what, so I mean, that might
do it.
That's
But,
place.
that's right. But we're always forgetting that. And so we have to keep coming back to it. Election contains it. That's why Paul likes it. It contains it. That God is the one who chooses us as a people. And when we do infant baptism, we can see it. We can feel it. That's what he's done from the beginning. From the beginning. Now, here we go with the song. Remember, usually I ask you what the title is. No, I don't want you to know the title. The title's too easy. Put up one hand. No title. If you know the Broadway show that's named after this group. This show swept the Emmys. Swept the Emmys in 2007, I think. Let's see here if I can get this going. No. Go. Can I get this going?
I think you turned the volume way down.
No, it's at 27. It's still blinking on me here.
It's a season of...
There we go. All right. Give me...
It's the first American
Give me the name of the Broadway show, one hand, and the real group, two hands.
And that night, I wrapped up a personal first. Oh, what a time! Late December back in '63. What a very special time for me. 'Cause I remember what a night.
So the real group?
Oh, what a night. You know I didn't even know her name, but I was never gonna be the same. What a lady, what a night. Oh, I got a funny feeling when she walked in the room.
Jersey Boys, 2007, terrific musical.
As I recall, it ended much too soon.
Frankie Valli and Four Seasons.
Hypnotizing, mesmerizing me. She was everything I wish she'd be. Won't surrender, what a night.
That's enough. Where's that? Good. Now you're really getting Four Seasons for Frankie Valli. Any of you seen it on stage? Oh, well, that's how you got it so fast. Have you seen it? Good. It's one of the finest musicals I've ever seen ever on Broadway, and they really did do well. Now, you get an A for today. If you can tell me when we're done the link between, where's my download here? The link between, here it is, our rock song and our hymn. Bonnie? Verse 5 and 6 of Take My Life. And let it be, we're going to do 5, and I'm going to ask Bonnie to give us a regular help on 5. Verse 6, we're going to sing our way out a cappella. That means no musical accompaniment, all right? Oh, okay, Bonnie, verse 5 and 6, down at the bottom. Oh, 391, Take My Life. Take my will and make it thine. It shall be no longer mine. Take my heart and it thine own. It shall be thy royal throne. It shall be thy royal throne. A cappella now. Take my love, my Lord, I pour at thy feet the treasure store. Take myself and I will be ever only all for thee. Ever only all for thee. Do you sound good? Have a great week. We are dismissed. Bye.